Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm Bob Clay. Welcome to Alaska Weather. Let's move right into the show here. There are no watch, warnings, or advisories currently in effect. Okay, let's take a look at that infrared satellite imagery, and we can basically see there's a couple lows here. There's a low here, and there's another low which is kind of spinning up along the frontal system here. There's another low which with the frontal system kind of extending across the central interior, and that's going to be moving up to the northeast there. And I'm going to move out of the way here, and there's another low pressure center also which is approaching the eastern and south central portion of south central. That doesn't make sense. It's approaching the central and eastern portion of the Aleutian Islands. So I'm going to set this in motion and move out of the way here for a second and let you kind of look at it. You can see those showers developing out over the out towards Shimia. Those are rain and snow showers. You can see that low pressure center, which is kind of moving north there. Now, we have a visible satellite picture, but it's really not a lot of use this time of year, so I'm just going to kind of skip through these to here. Right near the very end, you can see these dual low pressure centers here. If I can get this going one more time. There we go. Looks like it's starting to move there. And we can see the two centers here. We've got that one parent center here and another developing center just further to the south there. So let's move now to our satellite picture that we actually have some fronts on, and looks a little bit better. You can see here the low pressure center here with the front extending to another low pressure center just to the south here. We did have some range moved over into Kodiak, also over into the coastal areas of southeast Alaska. Sitka was one of the places that reported some rain. Now, the weak frontal system over the central interior sections did produce a little light snow up towards Bettles along the southern end of the Brooks Range there, and also it spread a little snow out over towards Nome and over the Seward Peninsula. There were some cloudy conditions with flurries and fog up along the Arctic coast today. And as you got a little bit further out over towards the east central Aleutians there, we can see that there was some rain over from Unalaska all the way out to Adak. And on the back side here, there's a little bit colder air, a little bit more convective, and we had some rain and snow showers reported over towards Shimei and the western Aleutian Islands. A little rain with a frontal system extending over into the Pribilof Islands. And you can see here, if I actually took the fronts off, you could actually see there's actually a couple little lows along this weakening frontal system here. And over in St. Lawrence Island, generally just some cloudy conditions. All right, now for tonight's weather, generally we're going to see these frontal systems pretty much continuing out there. We'll see rain and snow showers over the Bering Sea and also over, I should say, over towards the western portion of the Bering Sea and the western and central Aleutian Islands. We'll see this low pressure center now kind of moving up towards Unalaska, and we'll see generally some rain moving into the western portion of the Alaska Peninsula and, of course, over the eastern Aleutians there. And then we'll see generally some rain in the Pribilof Islands. Over in southwest Alaska, the flow is going to be kind of westerly, or say easterly, so generally I would say partly cloudy to mostly cloudy, particularly along the coastal areas. You'll see some mostly cloudy conditions. As you move over into the interior section, you'll see some light snow spreading up into the northeast interior of the state, also along the Alaska, or I should say Alaska, not the Alaska Range, well, along the Alaska Range, but along the Brooks Range and also along the Arctic slope. Now, further south, we have a low pressure center here, which is going to be kind of moving up towards the Kodiak Island area with the frontal system extending along the North Gulf Coast and then over towards the eastern Gulf there. So we'll see windy conditions along with some rain along the coastal areas here. And then as we get inland and a little bit along the North Gulf Coast, it'll start to mix up with rain and snow, and then over into the Cobb River Basin and further north we'll see snow in those areas. Cobb River Basin expecting about a couple inches tonight and a couple inches up in the upper Yukon Valley, so also along the Brooks Range for tonight. And again, some very windy conditions over in the Gulf of Alaska. Now, as we move in towards Sunday's map, we'll see the windy conditions are going to continue over in southeast Alaska along with the rain, also along the North Gulf Coast. And we'll see a mixture of rain and snow early in the day on Sunday, probably turning over to rain along the Anchorage Bowl I would suspect. We'll continue with probably snow into the Copper River Basin with some cold air kind of lingering in there. Now this warm frontal system I have showing here, basically the air is going to continue to warm, and you're going to see as we move towards Monday, this whole thing is going to kind of shift off to the northwest. With that, it's going to bring some light snow and also some cloudy conditions. But for tomorrow, generally the central interior sections, we're going to be looking for cloudy conditions with some light snow, continuing light snow with some windy conditions up along the Arctic coast expected for tomorrow. Over in southeast, or should I say southwest Alaska, generally I think probably the Bristol Bay area will be the area that we'll see probably most of the cloud cover and most of the rain and snow mix. As you get over towards the delta, the flow is going to be pretty much out of the east, so I think for the most part it's going to be generally dry. We'll see some relatively dry conditions along the Seward Peninsula also. Now as we get further south, now along the Alaska Peninsula, we'll see a low pressure center more or less continuing in that area. We'll see rain for the most part with some rain and snow showers with some cooler air along the central and the western Aleutian Islands. All right, now let's move into Monday's forecast, and the colder air is going to continue to spread off to the east, so we're going to see rain and snow showers continue along most of the Aleutian Islands, also spreading to the Alaska Peninsula as well as the Pribilof Islands. We'll see some rain and snow mix over the delta. When you see that warm front, which was over the central interior on Sunday, now it's going to push off to the northwest there. Again, it's going to bring snow just in advance of it. There's really not going to be a lot of precipitation on, to the lee of it there, but we'll see some cloudy conditions and maybe a smattering of rain and snow showers. And now further south, we'll see, generally I kind of carried it as a trough, or it could be pretty much a weakening front along the North Gulf Coast, continuing some rain and rain shower activity in those areas. And we have another developing center which is going to be moving up into the far south Gulf there, and that's going to bring another batch of some rain as we probably move in towards the Tuesday time frame. All right, now for our temperatures, now I'm going to see if I can do this now. The high and low today, 48 degrees over, and that was in Metlakatla and Heidelberg in southeast Alaska, and far north up in the Brooks Range there at Anativik Pass, they were minus 24 degrees. Okay, you can see here for today, these are about 2 p.m. this afternoon. You see generally 40s over southeast Alaska along the North Gulf Coast, some 30s for the most part along the southern portion of the Kenai Peninsula, 20s as you get into the interior. You can see that cooler air just kind of sitting over in the Copper River Basin, about -1 over Glen Allen today. And you can see some single digits for the most part over the central interior areas, kind of moving just a little bit better shot at it. Further north there, colder temperatures up along the Brooks Range and also along the Arctic and Beaufort Sea coast, and with some single digits down over towards southwest Alaska, and moving a little bit further south, some right around 30 along the coastal areas there, 30s along the Alaska Peninsula, which got some 30s and 40s along the Aleutian Islands, and some 30s in the Pribilof Islands. All right, let's take a look at what we're going to expect for our lows for tonight. Generally, we'll be looking for 30s for the most part over southeast Alaska along most of the North Gulf Coast. So cooler air, just single digits to minus numbers over the central interior sections. So continuing to cool up along the Arctic coast. We'll see some minus teens up in those areas. Now getting along southwest Alaska, generally looking for the lower teens, single digits probably in the inland areas with some 20s along the coast there. And then along the Alaska Peninsula, 30s along most of the Aleutians as well as the Pribilof Islands. All right, now for tomorrow's high, generally 30s to near 40 along the Aleutian Islands, 30s to 40s over along the Alaska Peninsula. And then as we get over towards southwest Alaska, 20s along the coastal areas, teens in the interior sections of the southwest, and moving way far north there, you can see some minus teens on the Arctic Sea coast end to some single digit minus numbers over on the Beaufort Sea coast end, and as in the warm spot of the state, other than the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, will generally be the 30s over south central Alaska, and we'll see some 30s to 40 degree readings in southeast Alaska. All right, now for our flying weather around the state. Well, as you would expect, as a low pressure center in the front kind of moves up along the North Gulf Coast, we're going to see widespread marginal VFR to IFR conditions over most of those areas, as well as over the Alaska Range, the Wrangell Mountains there, and also along the Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, widespread IFR conditions. Marginal VFR conditions always spreading all the way out towards the eastern Aleutians, and if I move out of the way here, we can see that that'll even encompass most of the Aleutian Islands. Now, noted but in the central and the western portion of Aleutians, those are going to be mainly rain and snow showers. So there'll probably be some breaks in there, probably going VFR for a little bit and then back, marginal VFR, possibly even IFR conditions. Along the Pribilof Islands, with that weakening frontal system there, I think it's probably going to be predominantly IFR conditions expected. And then along the Arctic coast and over towards the upper Yukon Valley and the eastern portion of the Brooks Range, during look for marginal VFR to probably some IFR conditions. And now we'll look at our past conditions around the state. And at Tuvik, we're going to be looking at marginal VFR conditions as well as Aitken. Now it's moving along the Alaska Range. Merrill and Lake Clark expect IFR conditions for tomorrow. Rainy will be IFR as we move up towards windy. They'll see some marginal VFR conditions. Isabel will generally start, I believe, at IFR, but I think we may see some marginal VFR conditions during the afternoon hours tomorrow. I'm going to go with the same thing with Mantesta. As we get over towards Tanita, I think it'll be predominantly IFR conditions, especially from the eastern approaches there, and we'll go to Portage. IFR conditions expected throughout tomorrow. And Chilkoot and White Pass probably are going to start marginal VFR, but eventually they'll probably shift over to IFR conditions. Okay, let's get my hands right here. Okay, so we can generally see that at the surface there, we're going to be looking at, I would say the colder area. You can see it as we looked at the rain and snow showers over the central Aleutian Islands. And then as we get over towards southwest Alaska, just south of the coast there, bumps up to 2,000 feet with that low pressure center approaching tomorrow over the eastern and Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula, and 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the Gulf there. And you can see right that rain and snow line kind of holding right along just north of the coast here, along the coast here of the Gulf there. All right, now let's take a look at our icing conditions. Well, again, frontal system kind of moving up there, a lot of moisture. We're going to be looking at generally some widespread moderate icing all the way from the eastern Aleutians there all to the southeast coast there. And generally below, I would think 15,000 feet. But we could see some isolated severe stuff, particularly over the eastern portion of the Gulf there. And also, I would say over the, Kenai Peninsula. All right, now for our jet stream. Generally, we're going to get this high over the mainland U.S. there, and then we've got a low pressure center generally over the Gulf of Alaska, extending all the way up towards the eastern Russia there. So generally, very strong zonal jet, or basically westerly jet, 160 to 170 knots, and drops down, but as it pushes out of the south again over the eastern Gulf there, about 90 knots or so. And if we look now at 9,000 feet, generally we can see this broad circulation with the lows kind of hanging over the Bering Sea, the Alaska Peninsula there. So you've got southerly winds anywhere from 30 knots, bumping up to 50 knots as you get over towards the eastern Gulf, southeast Alaska. And 3,000 feet, pretty much about the same pattern. The wind's a little bit weaker with some 35 knotters over the Gulf there. And now as we get down to turbulence, the resultant turbulence, look for some occasional or some isolated severe turbulence along most of the North Gulf Coast, southeast Alaska. You'll also see some along the Alaska Range, kind of through these gaps along the Alaska Range and then the Aleutian Range here. And also some moderate mountain wave turbulence, possible up to 25,000 feet to the lee of the mountains here. Other than that, this broad blue area here along the, I would think most of that will be below 12,000 over the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, and then about 15,000 feet as you get over towards mainland Alaska. All right, and that concludes this portion of the show. We'll be back next with the marine forecast.
We've just driven through 10 months of winter. The daylight's coming back, it's warming up. Everybody's got a little bit of cabin fever. And what do we throw in front of them? 18 hours of daylight, a pair of skis, and some fun activities.
Nana Nordic is the story of what happens when cross-country skiers from all over, Olympians, World Cup racers, university and high school coaches, share their sport with remote Alaska.
In 2011, I finished my season and I had 2 days to pack up for the trip. And to be honest, I didn't know what I was really getting myself into.
After the ski program left last year, the kids wanted to continue skiing and they missed not having that activity.
300 pairs of boots, poles, and skis were sent to the far north, above the Arctic Circle, to Kotzebue and the 10 surrounding villages. Located in northwest Alaska, the Inupiaq have lived in what is called the Nana region for more than 10,000 years. Transportation is by snow machine and airplane. Nordic skiing has not been a part of this northern culture, but that is changing. Despite their remoteness, the Nana region villages are busy with the activity of daily life. And for children, school.
Good morning, AKwx School. The temperature outside today is 14 below zero. Today, Nana Nordic will be visiting all the gym classes. Now on to your morning announcements.
The month of April, with 18 hours of sunlight, is perfect for cross-country skiing. Volunteer coaches taught the students a new way to enjoy the world just outside their door.
The volunteers come from all sorts of backgrounds. We have recreational skiers, we have competitive skiers, and we also have Olympians.
Good afternoon. We just flew in from Anchorage and we're here with...
It's really awesome to see them take up something new that may be challenging at first and just to succeed at it, and they have a lot of fun together, and it's something that's real positive and it's really healthy for them.
Our kids are really active and they enjoy being active. They would much rather do that than sit at home playing video games if there's somebody offering it.
Skiing feels kind of like swimming because you could feel the smooth air going across your face.
The students spent 5 days learning to ski, during school and after school. The emphasis was on fun and exploring the land.
The kids respond really well to skiing. I mean, a lot of them are maybe a little timid, a little afraid at the start. They learn that they're capable of doing these things that they didn't think they were capable of doing before.
You go right, left, and you can go as fast as you can, as slow as you can, and you could take your time.
We would like to have skiing as a school activity. It would be great to have a ski club up here, and we love to ski, and hopefully the communities enjoy skiing as well.
40 coaches, 1,500 students, 100 adults, 440 hours of coaching. Nana Nordic's goal is simple: introduce students and communities to cross-country skiing, a fitting sport for the place they call home and the world beyond.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the marine forecast for Sunday in southeast Alaska. The outside waters, you can see generally 40 to 45 knots. The seas 22 feet in the southern outside waters, over to the eastern Gulf 26 feet. And the inside waters start towards the southern end, southeast about 30 knots or so with 7-foot seas. North to northeast winds in the central sections, 30 knots with 6-foot seas. And Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, look for northerly winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Now for Monday, Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, pretty much about the same. The inside waters, central sections will be north to northeast winds, 25 knots with gusts to 45 knots. And the southern waters, southeast winds, 35 knots with 7-foot seas, probably 9 feet near the ocean entrance there. And then on the outside waters, generally southeasterly gales, 35 knots with seas, 18 feet. Now for Sunday's forecast for the western Gulf there, we'll start over towards Cape Suckling to Cape Clear, 50 knots out of the east or southeast and about 27 feet. And Cape Clear to Gore Point, look for easterly winds 35 knots with 22-foot seas. The Barren Islands, southeast of the Barrens, southeast winds 25 knots with 17-foot seas. Water near Kodiak Island, south winds 15 knots with a 12-foot swell. Shellicott Strait north to northeast winds, 25 knots with 8-foot seas. And west of the Barren Islands there, look for a northeasterly wind 40 knots with 10-foot seas. And Cook Inlet area, 25 to 30 knots out of the north to northeast. And south of I would say Point Beatty there, look for northeast winds 30. Well, what I was trying to get at here is we'll see the seas a little higher, about 10 feet over, just south of Point Beatty there. And then as we get over towards Prince William Sound, easterly winds 40 knots with seas to 10 feet. Now let's move towards Monday's forecast. Prince William Sound now is going to be easterly 25 knots with 7-foot seas. Winds dropping down on the Gulf, southeast winds 30 knots with 16-foot seas. Cape Clear to Gore Point, look for easterly winds 15 knots still with a 13-foot swell. Southeast of the Barren Islands 25 knots out of the southeast with 13-foot seas. And then over towards the waters near Kodiak Island, southerly winds 25 knots with 18-foot seas. Shellicott Strait, look for northerly winds 20 knots with 7-foot seas. West of the Barren Islands, northeasterly winds 25 knots, 8-foot seas. And over Cook Inlet, we look for north to northeast winds, 15 knots of seas to 4 feet. Now over towards the Alaska Peninsula for tomorrow, starting towards the eastern end, southeasterly winds 20 knots with 9-foot seas. Over the western end, westerly winds 40 knots with 24-foot seas. And just to the north there of the Alaska Peninsula on the western side, look for southwesterly winds 35 knots or 14-foot seas. And then as we get in towards the Bristol Bay area, look for northeast winds 25 knots with 4-foot seas. Now for Monday, we look for Bristol Bay, now southeasterly winds 25 knots with 6-foot seas. North of the Alaska Peninsula, look for southwesterly winds 35 knots with 12-foot seas. Westerly winds continuing over the southern waters, or I should say over the Pacific side along the Alaska Peninsula there. 40 knots with 25-foot seas. And over towards the eastern end, look for 35 knots southeast or southwesterly winds with 22-foot seas. All right, now towards the Aleutians there. Now you can see there, as you get over towards the eastern portions of the Aleutian, you're looking at 40 to 45 knots with seas anywhere from 19 to 25 feet there. As over towards the central sections, 35 to 40 with 14 to 19-foot seas. And as you get over towards the western sections there, basically westerly winds 30 to 35 knots with seas 19 to 20 feet or so. And now in towards Monday's forecast, we'll see out towards the western Aleutians, look for westerly winds about 20 knots with 12-foot seas. Over in the central sections there, westerly winds 20 knots with 12-foot seas. And the strongest winds, as you can see there, are going to be over towards the eastern Aleutians there. Westerly winds about 35 knots. The sea is about 18 feet or so. Okay, now let's move up into the Bering Sea. We'll start over towards the Pribilof Islands, where they're going to see northeasterly winds, 30 knots with 13-foot seas, 35 knots for the most part, or towards St. Matthew Island, and also 40 knots as you get up towards St. Lawrence Island. Seas 10 to 12 feet up in those areas. Also look for some freezing spray to heavy freezing spray over these marine areas throughout the day tomorrow with the cold northeast flow. Now as we get in towards Monday's forecast, we'll see freezing stay continuing, probably some St. Matthew Island area north. As you get towards the Pribilof Islands, I think it's going to be a little bit too warm for any kind of freezing spray down those areas. But as far as winds go, northeasterly winds towards the Pribilof, 30 knots with 13-foot seas, 45 knots now up towards the St. Lawrence Island with 14-foot seas, and again, heavy freezing spray up in that area. Now moving north, Wales to Cape Thompson, look for northeasterly winds 25 knots with 4-foot seas. Along the, and also just off Point Hope there, Cape Lisburne, 25 knots out of the northeast, but most of that's going to be, it's all ice covered, so there won't be any seas associated with that. So basically, along most of the Arctic coast and the Beaufort Sea coast, look for about 10 to 15 knot winds. And as we get in towards Monday's forecast, really that's not going to change over those areas. Now, as you get a little bit further east towards Point Ley, in those areas, look for a northeasterly winds 35 knots all the way down to Cape Thompson there and Wales area. Okay, now a quick wrap up around the state. A couple of low pressure centers, actually several here, but the main ones are with the one over towards the eastern Aleutians, which is going to be moving off to the northeast, bringing some windy conditions along with some rain along most of the North Gulf Coast and also the Eastern Gulf. Kind of mixes up as you get inland a little bit along the North Gulf Coast. Snow basically from the Copper River Basin north up towards the Arctic and Beaufort Sea coast. A little light snow in those areas. As you get in towards the forecast for Sunday, generally rain continuing along the North Gulf Coast. Low pressure center kind of moving a little bit along the Alaska Peninsula there. We'll see a mixture of rain and snow moving up into the Anchorage Bow, probably Susitna Valley, and then Copper River Basin probably still holding into that cold air, so probably snow there. And then a quick look as we get in towards Monday's forecast. And that's about all the time we have for tonight. Good night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.